So we're going to look at the slot tool. So we'll select a plane, go to Sketch, select the tool. By default it's on this straight slot, and again if we look at the icon it sort of gives us a clue on how this is constructed. First point is a center point at one end of the slot, and the second point is a center point at the other end of the slot. So we've defined those, and then the third point is the width of the slot. So you can see we're changing that there. And we can drag this around. By default it tries to put some relations in, and I let it put this one in, which was a horizontal relationship, because I dragged this initial line out horizontally and it snapped to that. But I don't have to keep that. I can select that relation and hit delete, and then it allows me to set that slot at whatever angle I need it at. So obviously you'd lock this down to some other geometry, or you'd put some dimensions in there and ensure that it was fully defined, so all the lines would turn black before you actually use the slot. So that's the first method of creating a slot. If we get the drop down list, we can create the same sort of slot using a slightly different technique. This one is a center point slot, and rather than defining the center points of the two semicircles at either end, we define the center of the slot first and then one of the centers of the semicircles. So very similar to the first type. It's just it always remains centered around a point. So I've locked this to the origin, which can be quite useful, but you can lock that to anything, and the slot will always remain centered around that point. And again, I allowed it to lock itself to horizontal, but you don't need to. You can have it at any angle that you want. Just remember to put dimensions and relations on and make sure it's fully defined before you use it. So the next one down in the list is the 3-point arc slot. So whereas these first two slots, they had two semicircles joined by two straight lines, this next pair of tools create a slot where the semicircles are joined by arcs. So we'll start creating the first one. I'll lock its first point onto the origin again. Second point creates the end of the arc. Third point defines how much curvature we have in that arc. So the radius of curvature of the arc, we'll put quite a mild amount of curvature on that. And then the third point is just the width of the slot. So there you go. It gives you a slot which runs along an arc rather than a straight slot. But it still maintains the relationship between the ends here and the joining portion. They will always be tangent to each other. So you'll not get a harsh transition between this end geometry and this arc that's joining them together. So last tool in the slots drop down list. It's just a different method of creating the type of slot that we've just created. But with this method you define the center point of the arc first, then the radius of the arc, and then the angle which the arc swings through. So we'll make this quite a large angle, like that, and there you can see it's an arc based slot, but it's just a slightly different method of creating it. So if you need the center of the construction arc, which is this dashed line in the center, to be centered around a certain point, that's quite useful. So that's the slot tool.